Thank you for being here today, Rotarians and guests. In 1999, McKenna and Associates did a city plan for Bryan, Ohio. At that time, we were listed twice in the top 10 best small towns in America. I'd like to see that happen again. McKenna, our city planners, in reading over all the things that their company does, it's pages and volumes. They do city planning, industrial planning, bike paths, landscaping, parks and rec, repurposing. They work on blight in poor neighborhoods. Just a few highlights of things that I think we need in our Bryan and Williams County area. John Jackson is president of McKenna. He went to Miami University and has a master's degree from the University of Michigan. His associate is my Lebanese friend, Chris Corey, who hails from Notre Dame and University of Pennsylvania. Their company works on neighborhoods and communities from 4,000 population up to 60,000. And they have developed over 85 communities to the best of their abilities. Their scope is amazing. They work in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Chris tells me barely into Wisconsin. So I'll turn this over to John Jackson, president of McKenna, and hopefully this will be a benefit to everyone in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. I appreciate that nice introduction, and I appreciate being invited down here to talk a little bit about master planning and why it's important and what are the benefits of doing a master plan update. But before I get much into it, again, my name's John Jackson. I'm the president and owner of McKenna as of 2 years ago, so I'm excited to be in a position to direct where the company goes. And as part of that, one of the things that we've emphasized over the last couple of years, and even really over the full 40 years that we've been in business, is that our approach is really how do we plan for communities in a way that is realistic. So planning for communities in real life, you know, what can we actually do? We don't want to do plans that sit on the shelf. We want to do plans that can be implemented. We want to do plans that provide communities with direction on how to achieve their vision. So that's sort of our motto and our approach to planning. We're not some pie-in-the-sky academics looking at things from a detached perspective. We're really boots on the ground, trying to get results. So that's sort of our approach. So a couple of questions real quick in the line of raising hands. Who was here and involved when the last master plan was done in 1999? Okay, a couple people. So if you're sitting on either the right or the left side of it, please write a check for $10,000. You guys, I'm thinking that's where we should target the budget. Anyway, the other observation I have real quick is it seems like there's a lot of movers and shakers in this room in terms of people that would be involved in charting the future of Bryan. And so one of my ideas was to lock the doors and stay here until we get the plan done. So who's up for that? Raise your hand. Okay, all right, we got some takers. That's good. But seriously, I think Chris is going to do most of the presentation. Chris is a principal planner for McKenna, and he's also the director of our West Michigan operation. Chris has also done a lot of work in Ohio communities. Over the last several years, we've had up to 3 offices in the state of Ohio. We're registered to do work in Ohio. We've done work in a lot of Ohio communities. My son went to Oberlin College and played on the football team there, so we got to visit a lot of really cool towns in Ohio, and they're very unique in terms of their economy, in terms of their demographics, and things like that. So You know, we're familiar with Ohio and some of the opportunities that are there. As I mentioned, we didn't come down here with a plan, and we really don't necessarily want to exclusively market ourselves, but we want to spend some time talking about why update your plan, and Chris is going to talk mostly about that, but a couple of observations for myself, having been doing this for a long time. Number one is, when you do a master plan, when you take all of the issues that are you know, current and pressing and concerning to people, it really helps, doing a plan really helps to create a vision for the next generation. And I think that's important. It's a legacy. It's something that you can do now that will benefit the generations to come. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. Also, it helps to identify people's hopes and their enthusiasm. You know, and it helps put that in a framework, like I said before, where you can make progress and make progress on achieving those hopes and expectations. Also, when you do a master plan, it requires that you engage business people, like the ones that we saw here today, opening and investing in downtown Bryan. We have to engage the county. We have to engage other agencies. And so doing the master plan update really helps strengthen those relationships and create really productive alliances. So that's a very important part of the plan as well. Another reason to update the master plan is because a lot of the people that are sitting at home right now wondering what the future is for the community, wondering what the leaders of the community are doing, it's an opportunity to communicate with them and inform them. Here's all the things that we see as issues, and here's how we're going to address them. And also to engage them and find out what they think about those issues and how we plan to attack them. So engaging the public and informing the public is another major reason. There's a lot more, but with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk a little bit more about it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, John. As John said, we're really excited to be here back in Bryan. It's been almost 20 years since the 1999 master plan, which of course McKenna was involved in. But more importantly, the community members and the leaders of the community in Bryan, like yourselves, were involved in to create that vision and create the community that Bryan's become today. So the question is, what are the next 20 years going to hold, or the next 50 years, or the next 5? What's going to go on in Bryan, Ohio? Renee rattled off to me, a number of really exciting projects that everyone in this room is involved in. And so I think what we see a master plan process in this town being like is to harness all of that energy, bring it together for a unified vision, and then make sure that, all right, so the big picture vision all fits together, that we're pulling in the same direction, and also that we've looked at the details, all right? The little things that make sure that our grand vision is going to work on a day-to-day basis. So 4 big reasons we think to update a master plan. John already listed off several, but I want to get into 4 in some detail. First is to confirm our vision for what our community is going to be. Second is to react to new trends. Third is to be quote-unquote redevelopment ready. And then 4th is to create an action plan. When we talk about confirming the vision, it's about gathering the community together. This is a really wonderful group to see come out for a Rotarian meeting. I actually presented on a different topic to a Rotary organization, and they had half a dozen people. So it is really great to see this kind of community involvement in an organization like this kind of dedication to the community. But it's not just the leaders and the movers and shakers, as John said, in this room, but the entire nearly 9,000 people who live in this community. And in the surrounding rural areas, in the townships, bringing them in together and having a discussion. What is our future? Where are we going? Where are we going to be in 2030, 2040, 2050? You can do that traditional ways. This is a great way to do it. Get some food, sit around, tell some jokes, have some fun. But there's also modern technology. When McKenna does a master plan, we create a website, dedicated website for it. We drive traffic to that website through social media. We've done some really neat things with getting QR codes out of the community, handing out iPads at community events. People are able to do their input. We'll create community forums so that online, so people can converse with each other, not just speak back and forth to officials or planners, have been talked to each other about what's going on, and that kind of thing. So there's opportunities now that there weren't in 1999 to let people engage on their time. And for us, that's really the great thing about technology. Oh, it's cool, it's technology. But what the real practical positive is that when you have a meeting or something, and people have to be at a certain place at a certain time, and they're busy, and they miss it, sometimes if the kids get sick, whatever, oh, they miss their opportunity to engage in the process. Well, you can use technology to allow them to engage when they have an opportunity to, on their schedule, and that really helps bring more people into the process. We know that WEDCO just finished a housing study, which is really exciting. And I have a few of their conclusions from that housing study up here. I don't know how many people have looked at it. I know there's a copy floating around in the room somewhere. But one thing they said is that we're looking at a housing market poised for growth. Again, finally, right? After the Great Recession, we may finally be looking at growth again in this county. And that is likely to be localized here to Bryan as the county seat, as the largest community in the county, as the economic center of the county. But the demand that we're seeing for housing is maybe a little different than what we saw in the past. There's this concept called the missing middle of the housing market. Think about a lot of the housing out there. You've got single family homes on one end, on the other hand you've got big apartment complexes, right? Those are opposite ends of the same spectrum. Well, there's a whole bunch in the middle. There's a whole bunch in there, right? Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch. Put it that way. And it's the kind of housing that can be brought to a community like Bryan in a high quality fashion while still being accessible for people who are maybe just starting their career, maybe just moved out of their parents' house, or on the other end, want to downsize their home because the kids are all gone. They don't need all those bedrooms anymore. They can't mow the big lawn anymore. They don't want to anymore. All right, so they want to downsize the housing a little bit. That's where this demand for this center of the housing market that we haven't built for so long, or in some places really ever. Just some examples of what this kind of thing could look like and how it could work with the character of a town like this. I know that there's some kinds of concerns where it's like, well, with smaller housing, what's that going to look like? How's that going to mess with is that going to mess with our character, right? We have this beautiful housing stock here. Well, it's things like this, where you have these homes that are in the same sort of massing and architecture as a single family home, right? But you see there's two doors, so it's actually a duplex. But you wouldn't, as you walk down the street, you wouldn't think, whoa, that's way out of scale, or that can't work. If you wanted a few more units, you can still get it in sort of the scale of this single family home that fits in your historic neighborhoods. So that's one thing to look at. But how do you get something like this? It's not just going to happen, right? Because if what WEDCO is saying in this market study is accurate, and you're going to start getting housing growth, if you don't have a master plan in place and a zoning ordinance supported by that master plan, you're going to get whatever the developer wants to build, right? And that might be big houses on the edge of the community. It might be a big apartment complex that just drives traffic and is constantly getting public safety calls, right? Rather than something that can really create strength and durability and economic vitality in your community. So we need to create a master plan that articulates that. That articulates what is it that we want, and then you can put it into a regulatory framework through your zoning ordinance, so you will have to build what you want and create the community you envision. Another trend that we're seeing, and actually our cursory look, is that Bryan may not be in that much danger of things like this, but we're seeing this all over the country, is this contraction. Retail is going in like two divergent directions, right? You have retailers that are doing really, 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 really well. You got your Walmarts on one end. On the other end, you have your Kmarts, your Sears, right? They're slowly circling the drain. And the question for communities is, all right, what are we going to do with these? What are we going to do with these facilities? And it doesn't have to necessarily be big box retail. It's what are you going to do with these legacy facilities that were built for one specific purpose, but that purpose is gone? How are we going to bring these back? How are we going to be creative and bring them back? So there's some options, right? When something like this goes vacant, you get the Halloween store moved in, right? They're there for 6 weeks, and then it's gone again. And then fireworks comes, right? 4th of July, and then it's gone again. And in the meantime, nobody's maintaining the parking lot or anything like that, and everything starts to deteriorate. It's just a negative. So that's not really what we want. And a little better is what they call the junior box retailers, who we know are attracted to communities like Bryan. We've seen them come in to smaller markets because they are looking at a little bit smaller, they're looking for smaller space. They're not looking for quite the huge margins that the big boys are looking for, and these can break up the smaller spaces. But could these places become really something special? What you see here on the left is your traditional, Walmart with the outlots and the restaurants and things like that, and then that big parking lot, which is only ever full on the day after Thanksgiving, right? If then. Well, what if we created something truly special out of that? Took all that space, made it something where the community could gather, made it something where your taxes per square foot are higher because you're not all parking lot, right? Made it something that could support the community rather than the community having to support it. So when you do a master plan process, and John mentioned this, we at McKenna pride ourselves on creating plans that lead directly to implementation, which in more plain English means we are planning for real life. That's our slogan, community for real life. So when you come up with a vision, and you come up with projects, and then you see it happen on the ground in your community, right? But there's also the way to make sure that your planning and zoning documents are creating the community you want outside of the big investments that the Rotarians, all of you are doing in the community, right? Because there's a lot of like, oh, we're going to do these really exciting projects, but what about those day-to-day, every property contributing to the vision? So I like this example of this small town in Michigan where we worked. We did a master plan for them. And as you can see, maybe on the left, it's a little blurry up there. Watch me make it worse. Yep, worse. That's better. As you can see on the left, what we did with the master plan is you can see all those dotted lines around sites in the community. That was where we said, this site is not living up to its potential, right? It's either vacant or blighted, or the property owner is trying to shop it around, trying to figure out, okay, who wants this? I want to sell it. So those are we saw those as not problems, but opportunities. Where can we, what can we do on these sites to improve the community? The one, the picture is, it was a business that sold cement blocks, cinder blocks, and it had gone out of business. And so it was a building and a bunch of old cinder blocks, like, the worst site you can imagine, just ugly, right in the middle of this town. We said, all right, what is the future of this going to be? So the master plan envisioned the future of that site with the property owner, with the neighbors, with developers and businesses, saying, okay, what can we put on this site together as a group? Not from the government down saying you have to do this, but working together as a group. Then we took and put that into the village zoning ordinance, so that because the master plan is vision, the zoning ordinance is law. We put it into the zoning ordinance. This is exactly what we want here. In a form-based code, which is a term maybe some of you have heard, that says not just these are the uses that are allowed, but this is what we want it to look like when it's built. And what I really like about this is you look at that top right picture, 2 stories, and the 3rd story is set back a little bit. Well, that's exactly what we got. The developer came in and built exactly what the master plan said we wanted to see built there. And that is now under construction. So we're pretty excited about that. But how do you do that kind of thing? There's a major challenge in master planning. You come up with a great vision, everyone's excited about it, but how do you go to action? We actually usually use this slide to demonstrate how the skills of our urban designers and our graphic artists, right? As you can see, this beautiful, that's actually City Hall, surrounded by parking lots, and then we've drawn in all these buildings. Okay, but that's great, now we drew a picture. How do you actually get that built? So one thing we like to do is we call this action plan matrix. We put this in the document. And what this does, and is a little harder to see on a PowerPoint, but when you get in the document, I think it's really helpful. It's a task on the left with a priority, a time frame, and the people responsible. And this is what is going to happen, this is when it's going to happen, this is who's in charge, this is how we're going to get the money. It's all listed out right there. So as you work forward, and this plan hopefully lasts you another 20 years like your last one, you'll know, all right, well, we've gotten through the first half of this list. So this year, the priority is this. And a group like this, a group like the city council, but then a group like the Rotarians who get together and talk about city issues can say, all right, what's on the list this year? What are we all working towards? And what did we decide we were going to do? So with that, I think John and I would like to talk a little bit, ask there any questions. I did see a few hands go up. Yes, sir.
When you're talking about a master plan, and you're talking about getting the community input, do you see the demographic driving the vision, or the vision driving the demographic?
Interesting. You mean in terms of,
For instance, one thing that we would like to see in our community is we have a lot of our young people, they graduate high school, they go off to college, and they don't come back to Bryan. We would like to make Bryan more appealing to those people. Do you see the vision driving that to try to bring them back in? Or do you see that Bryan is who it is and we just try to appeal to those people that are living here?
no, absolutely. Well, first off, that is a problem or a concern that many communities face, especially in this part of the country, especially towns about this size. That there's an attraction of the big city. So there's a couple things. First off, we need to make sure that in the master plan process, we engage that population. We engage first the high school kids who are thinking about their future, the kids who are in college, which is very tough because they're not even here, right? To say, oh, what's your plan? Are you going to come back? Is coming back seen as failure? Because sometimes it is, oh, you moved home. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? You came home, you got a job, and you continue to build up that community. So maybe you need to drive that. And then the 20-somethings, people who are just starting their families, and then finally the 30-somethings, who are, maybe they went off to New York City for a while, but maybe they'll come back to raise a family. So we need to figure out what all four of those groups want out of a community and make sure that all plays into the vision. So I think that it's not something, we should not give up on that. It's not something we say, that generation's going to leave. Well, because if they leave, then who's left, right? But we also maybe need to make sure that they have the input so the community that's created is the kind of place that young people want to come back to. And it is come back because we want them to go away and get that education. We want them to come back. So how do we create that community they want to come back to? Anyone else? I put everyone to sleep?
Do you,
Well, I can
go
tell you
ahead,
one
George.
thing. My daughter lives in Columbus, she's not gonna come back to Bryan. She's got a lot of friends from Bryan that live in Columbus.
Yeah.
It's a growing place. They're jumping down there.
So, when we talk about trying to keep the kids or bring the kids back, I've got 5 boys, and 3 of them are in college right now, and I don't know if they're going to come back or not, but I think when you're asked that question, you're really asking, how do we attract that demographic, right? So we don't necessarily want little Joey to come back. I mean, we may or may not. He may end up in our basement for another 5 years. But we want to appeal to that demographic. So it's just like any other business plan. How do you market it? What do you have to offer to the different demographics, right? And that's a key one. It's that talent pool. How do you attract the talent pool? So we know that the economy is strong in this region. The unemployment rate is almost at historic lows, if not at historic lows. So we know there's jobs, but so what else is missing? Is it the housing? Do they not have the right housing choices? Do they not have enough bars to go to? What would attract them? Because you're right, unless they have other buddies here, they're not going to want to be the only one coming back. So we need to look at all of the things that appeal to those age groups and provide all of that. That's why it's a comprehensive plan. We need to look at recreation opportunities, social opportunities, all those things that those young people look for. Yep.
Have you guys experienced any strategies that work for small towns that don't have some of those natural features like a river or a lake or some of those things that people naturally gravitate towards?
So any successful or sustainable economic development strategy has to start with what your assets are. So in other words, if you don't have those assets, you can't market yourself as the best community along the river. If there's no river, they're going to see through it pretty quick. So you need to look at what you have. Maybe you're the, maybe you cultivate the best high school athletes, or maybe you have great job training, or maybe you have cultural opportunities in downtown, art, performances, performing art, things like that. So you need to find what your assets are and build on those. Otherwise, like I said, they're going to see through it. Oh, I'm sorry. And one other thing I mentioned earlier about relationships and connections. So economic development, again, is a regional activity. So look at developing relationships with communities that have those assets that you're talking about, and then provide something that's complementary to that they don't have, that you can co-market together.
Well, I was just going to use the term placemaking, which you managed to not
Boy,
use.
I
Yeah.
talked
But-
all along.
Well, for the non-AICPs in the room, placemaking is the idea of, like John said, building on your assets. You have that incredible courthouse, right? It's pretty architecture. Right now, it's just pretty architecture. So what can we use to build on that to make Bryan a place that people say, we got to stop there, and then we got to shop there, and then we got to move there, because it's just a fun place to hang out. It's a friendly community. Obviously, we've already experienced that today, and it's just a place you want to be.
When it comes to the action side of things, walk us through a little bit, like who holds those accountabilities when you talk about roles, holds the roles of money, et cetera. Who do you see typically in those communities that you help with?
Sure. It has to be a group effort, right? So of course it has to be led by your city council. It has to be led, and the county has a role to play as well. Economic development professionals, but they can't do it alone, right? That's where the engaged and motivated members of the community, which is who we have in the room today, really come into play. And by creating a process that delegates those tasks to the entity that is most reasonably responsible for it, that it can get it done. Sometimes it'll be a business. You may have someone in a master plan and it's like, well, this particular business site, we want to upgrade and that business wants to grow. Well, that's their responsibility, and they are then supported by the community in doing that, right? So I think that's the way you kind of develop that action plan. But there are some times where you're going to say, well, we really want to do this, but we're not sure where the money's coming from. And then maybe you got to push that down the list a little bit and have subtasks of, well, we're going to find the money for this. We're going to start working on grants. We're going to do that kind of thing. So it really does have to be a team effort.
Just to follow up on that real quick, so we have a saying, sort of put your money where your mouth is, right? So from a local government standpoint, the local leaders have to make decisions on their budget every year. And so we use this in the communities that we represent. One thing I didn't mention is a lot of these communities that we're talking about, we're their planners on a day-to-day basis. So we go to the council meetings every month, and we listen to how things are going. Are they working? Are they not working? So we know what it's like to follow this up on a daily basis. And every year you do a budget, right? And so we wave this around when it's budget time and say, you said you were going to put money towards this. So, and we force them or encourage them to make those tough decisions. And then, like Chris said, the other part of that is how do you leverage that? And it goes back to the relationships. How do you turn $1 into $2 with grants? So it's a matter of putting your money where your mouth is and then leveraging the resources.
Yeah.
John, Chris, could you share with us maybe a community of our size that's gone through the development stage and where they were and where they're at today?
Which one do you choose?
I talked to him about Oxford probably being the one of them.
Yeah, that's well, I put it in the slideshow, but that's a really good example just because this is a town. It's actually a little smaller than you guys, but it's a little closer to big metro. It's in fact technically part of metropolitan Detroit, but right on the edge. Small town, has a historic downtown, but struggles with the downtown struggles specifically with the fact that the town is surrounded by gravel quarries, and so gravel trains rumble through the main street every day. And the town had sort of developed this pockmarked landscape of, like I said, these sites that they weren't living up to their potential. And so what we did with their plan is we identified those sites, worked with the stakeholders specific to those sites, and got a pathway forward to rebuild it. And some of them have moved more quickly than others. I pointed out one that's moved pretty quickly. But by engaging those people during the process, everyone was ready to go, ready to invest. We had another example, another small town, also in Michigan near the Lansing area, where what they said is, all right, when we went in the master plan process, they said we got an infrastructure problem. They had their water and sewer system and their stormwater systems were crumbling. And water was backing up into people's basements and their front yards, and just because it wasn't, the system wasn't working adequately. And not only that, they were short a whole bunch of sidewalks. Like this is a historic community, but sidewalks have just never been built there. So we did a couple things at once, actually, there. We helped them get safe routes to school money, which if anyone is familiar with that, it's a little bit like the movie Remember the Titans, where he says, like, if you survive football practice, you will be on the team. Well, that grant process, if you survive the grant process, they will give you money. If you survive. All right. And we survived, and we had the money for the sidewalks. And then since the sidewalks were going to have to tear up the edges of the streets anyway, at the same time, the county drain commissioner came in and dug deeper ditches and started fixing the stormwater problem. And because we had to tear up the intersections, the crosswalks, we went in, dug deep, and fixed the sewer and the water lines, right? And so in a matter of 5 years, using a lot of outside funding, because this small town didn't have a lot of its own, we were able to turn around that infrastructure problem, really invest, and then do some cool stuff. We had we built bike lanes throughout the town. We got the industrial park up and running again with new development because the community had shown the ability to invest in itself. So the private sector decided to come in and invest. So that's the kind of thing that, as John said, in a lot of communities, we're in there day to day, and we hope to be like that with you guys, to be there on the ground helping you make this vision happen.
So we're getting the hook. So I just want to make one more comment before I give up the mic. I just came from an economic development conference in Frankenmuth, Michigan, and one of the keynote speakers was a representative from Huntington Bank, who gave an incredible overview about the economy and how positive it is right now. The economic outlook right now is extremely positive, probably for the next couple of years is what he was anticipating. So what does that mean? That means get going right now. Get going right now, do your plan right now, start putting things in place, start getting the investments going, start priming the pump, and take advantage of this good economy for right now. So thank you all very much for being here today. We appreciate it. Thank you.